What's up everyone, Carlos here with another Predator lore video. This one is a collection of the last few videos I made over a couple of months ago. It's a few stories that are over an hour long, so if you prefer to watch longer videos, this should keep you busy. As always, I'm going to leave timestamps below, so you can skip to the stories you want to hear the most. Thanks for watching, and please leave a like rating on the video. Enjoy. With the news about the latest installment to the Predator films being around Native Americans, I thought this would be a good time to look back at one of the stories in the novel Predator, If It Bleeds. It was released in 2017, and it contains about 16 new stories, all taking place in different time periods and locations. One of them that I wanted to go over was the story, May Blood Pave My Way Home. It takes place in the year 1916. It includes a lieutenant named Providence Pope, along with his superior officer Captain Sunderson and other soldiers. While they were pursuing Pancho Villa's army through Mexico, their group was still at war with Comanches and Apaches for a while. When they made an overnight stop, Pope headed to the command tent to formulate an argument to get Commander Sunderson to listen to him. But as he made his way there was movement off the corner of his right eye. When he turned to look, no one was there. But still, as he looked around, a bush moved, and then another. Just then, a set of rifles fell. He couldn't see who it was, and there was no sound, but it could have been the image of a man. He let out a cry and ran to the fallen rifles. The whole camp had woken up, and they searched for an hour, but they found nobody out there. The guards were doubled, just in case. Pope was sure he saw something out there, but he wasn't sure what it was. They were 10 days into what was left of their mission to find Pancho Villa for his attack on United States sovereign soil, but Pancho Villa turned out to be a ghost. After the Battle of Carrizal, a messenger arrived. It was to inform the general his army was being recalled. The 10th Cavalry Regiment was to head east to a boat and sent to the war in Europe. When Sunderson and Pope were discussing their situation in the command tent, Husker John interrupts them and says, "We got a problem, sir. Sentries to the west and south are gone." Sunderson asks why there was no alarm sound. It's because they were within Indian country. Word was sent within their group, and the men prepared. There was a maneuver they practiced before, and it worked against other Comanches in the past. They rolled onto their bellies and fired into the bushes. Screams of the Comanche warriors filled the air. As more rounds fired off, smoke filled the air in the moonlight. But just then, Pope saw movement around B Troop's flag. A strange-looking Comanche appeared before them. It just appeared into existence. It wore strange armor and had even stranger hair. Pope aimed his pistol and shot the warrior in the back. The warrior turned around, whipping his hair in the process. It held a strange pistol in his hand. Pope fired again, and the shot hit the warrior's chest, pushing him back as it fired its own weapon. It was aimed towards Pope, but it missed him. The projectile expanded like a net, and then it contracted into a mesh upon impacting Private Steve. Pope would unload more bullets into the strange warrior, injuring it more. The warrior would flash in and out of existence. Husker John would then run in to tackle the strange warrior. He grabbed a stone and brought it down on the warrior's head once, and then twice. The strange Comanche was stopped. As Pope got his bearings, he saw his men shooting at moving shadows. Pope watched as some of his men were taken down, and another was pulled into the air and thrown. The body crashed to the ground with an awkward twisting of its limbs. Pope went over to Husker John to see the fallen Comanche up close. But something was different. This was a Comanche they have never seen before. It wore armor of some sort. It felt like metal, but softer, and it had a mask of some kind over its face. This was no Comanche. This was a completely different Indian altogether. Pope grabbed the warrior's pistol. He expected it to be heavy, but it was actually light. Just then, another warrior came rushing through the lines towards them. Pope fired the net gun weapon and caught this Comanche in the air, slamming it to the ground. It spoke back to them saying, Indi Mok, from under its mask. It repeated the words again, Indi Mok. Husker John said, "It doesn't sound like a Comanche." Pope then said, "It's because this isn't a Comanche. I don't know what he is." Another of the strange warriors blinked into existence. This one was taller and held a long spear with a wicked-looking end. It moved very fast, dodging bullets as it cut down men at B Troop with ease. Pope then realized this warrior was making its way towards him. He felt a moment of fear as he watched this warrior cut down more of his men. Pope raised his weapon and aimed at the warrior they took down previously, waiting for the other one to approach them. It then stopped before him. Its blade was inches before Pope. Both of them paused for a moment, and Pope said this, "Drop your weapon, or I'll kill him." He had no idea if the warrior would understand, but it spoke back in Pope's voice, "Drop your weapon, or I'll kill him." As Pope heard his own voice, he blinked in confusion. "Who are you?" he asked. The warrior spoke back again in Pope's voice, "Who are you?" This warrior was taller than the one they took down earlier. It wore the skeletal remains of what looked like a bear claw on a dark chain. Its armor was similar to the Knights of the Crusades, but this one was articulated to allow for easier movement. It wore a mask like the other Comanche they had on the ground. Pope noticed by now most of the gunfire had stopped. Husker John whispered, "Is it the devil, LT Pope?" Pope shook his head and said, "The devil don't bleed." He then asked, "Who are you, and why are you here?" The warrior's head turned and spoke in an accent Pope did not recognize. "We are Yautja. We fight with Comanche." Pope said, "Comanches are our enemy. Does that make you our enemy as well?" The Yautja then responded, "Uman Kubar, Uman." Through an English translation, it meant humans hunting humans. Pope considered the statement in this way, "We hunt them because they hunt us. We hunt first, so they will not hunt last." The Yautja spun its spear and pointed it down. It seemed like the attack was at pause for a moment. Several of Pope's men that were still alive had gathered behind the Yautja, their weapons raised, ready to fire. But then Pope had a crazy idea, one that he had to act upon right away. He pulled the injured Yautja to his feet and offered him back to the other one and said this, "Here, take him. I don't know how to heal him." The larger Yautja hesitated for a bit, but then grabbed the smaller injured warrior. Sunderson then got into the situation and asked, "Lieutenant Pope, what do you have there?" Pope then said to his men, "Do not harm these two. Let them go free on my command." Sunderson then asked why. Pope said, "Letting them take their wounded." Sunderson was not agreeing with this decision and ordered his men to fire upon the Yautja, walking away from them. Pope warned them, "Do not fire." His men felt nervous as they looked at Sunderson and then back to Pope, and so they refused to fire their weapons. Sunderson had enough of the situation. He drew his pistol and fired into the back of the retreating Yautja. The larger Yautja turned around and threw a round piece of metal. It embedded into the chest of Sunderson. He gasped, and his pistol fell from his hand. He dropped to his knees while coughing out blood. Pope ran over to him, seeing a metal disc vibrating into Sunderson's chest. This disc then flew out backwards and was caught by the larger Yautja, who then disappeared without a trace. The soldiers around them were unsure of what just happened and what they encountered. Some of them stood, and others went down to their knees and began to pray. Sunderson took his last breath and collapsed dead. For the rest of the night, Pope sent his men to recover the bodies of their fallen soldiers. They cleared the battlefield and placed double sentries, just in case. Pope believed they would do well against the Comanche, but probably would have no chance against the Yautja, especially the big one with the spear. Out of 100 men that were with him, 65 survived, and from that number, 39 were unscathed. Some men thought the Yautja were demons, but Pope was unsure. But something they did learn is that this warrior can bleed. Later on, they received a visitor from a mule skinner Comanche. It would only speak to Pope. Here's what he said. The message is from the Nanasut Wakit. They are also known as the Yautja. The battle between them and the Yautja is not finished. They demand you fight. They are spirits. None can stand before them, and they walk the spirit plane when they disappear. They say that 4 of them will fight 4 of your best warriors. After this battle, all of your men can go free, regardless of who wins or loses. Pope assumed they were already free, but the Comanche said, No, you're not. The Nanasut Wakit are all around us. They are just in spirit form. Pope then had a feeling of fear, just thinking of an army of invisible Yautja were surrounding them. As he looked around to examine the shadows, 3 times a Yautja made itself briefly appear and then disappear, just to make itself known. Pope asked if the Yautja would keep their word. The mule skinner assured him, It is part of their honor. That's how they came to us. They fought our best. We lost. Then they joined us and helped us. They were with us for 6 months now. The Nanasut Wakit love to fight. They don't drink or play games. They fight. Pope didn't like the idea, but this was the best way to save the lives of the other men, so he agreed. Pope was told to enter the next valley, which is 5 miles away. They are waiting for you. Just bring your group of 4 men. He went through his group, looking for the 3 others that would join him for this battle. The 4 men were Pope, Husker John, Conroy, and the 4th was Moats, who volunteered. Each man had a rifle, pistol, skinning knife, and hatchet taken from fallen Apaches. Conroy had a shotgun, pistol, spear, and a knife. He brought his motorcycle while traveling with the others. They discussed how to best approach the battle and how these Yautja operate. They come in different sizes. Each one uses different weapons, so it's possible they have a ranking system. When they entered the valley, it was more like a box canyon covered in dirt and dry grass. As all 4 of them moved to the empty space, 4 Yautja appeared 20 feet before them, and others appeared on the rocks. Pope was hoping they were just spectators, and all of this was not a trap. But the appearance of the 4 Yautja was interesting. Each one was of almost equal size to the humans. It was as if the Yautja selected the sizes specifically, which meant a fairness to the fight. The giant warrior from the previous night then appeared. He spoke to the humans with that accent. 4 fight, then done. Pope asked about weapons, and the giant Yautja said, 2 only, which is a sign of honor. Pope made a demand for the 4 Yautja to remove their armor. The tall Yautja responded, If no armor, then none of your loud weapons. It was then clear that their armor provided minor protection from the human firearms. Without the armor, they would fall much quicker. So then, both sides agreed to the terms. Pope also asked them to not use that throwing disc that was used on Sunderson. The large Yautja responded, These Yautja do not use this weapon. They are not ready for it. Pope then asked, To the death then, and the Yautja said, To the death. As the 4 men removed their shirts and hats, they left their weapons in a pile. They looked over to the Yautja, who removed their armor and masks. Pope identified the mandibles on their faces, like it was from some kind of insect. Each mandible ended in a tooth, claw, or talon. Suddenly, all 4 Yautja clicked their mandibles together, and their shoulders shook slightly. Pope realized they were laughing at the men's reactions. They were laughing at their fear. Pope reminded his men, Each of you have faced down Comanches and Apaches. Each of you have been up close and personal with someone who wanted you dead. The Yautja are just another type of Indian. All you need to know is that they can bleed. If they can bleed, they can die. Moats went to fight first. As his opponent charged towards him, the Yautja swung forward, but Moats went under and cut the thigh of the Yautja. But instead of charging this time, the Yautja stalked Moats. Then it swung. Moats would swing back, but the Yautja made him miss. He kicked the knife out of Moats' hand and swiped his windpipe with its bladed weapon. Moats had made a mistake, which cost him his life. The head was ripped from the body and taken as a trophy. The Yautja let out a shriek in his victory. Conroy was up next. He brought his motorcycle to the center of the arena, holding a spear in his right hand. He gunned his motorcycle towards another Yautja, which moved aside to avoid the vehicle. Conroy then stopped and spun the wheel to throw dirt in the Yautja's face. He then drove 20 feet away and turned back, heading towards the Yautja. As it was blinded from the dirt, Conroy's spear impaled the Yautja in the chest, and he pushed through. He held onto the spear and drove the Yautja a dozen yards. The Yautja was severely weakened and fell over. As Conroy continued his assault on the fallen warrior, with the last of its strength, the Yautja reached up to embed its claws in the right side of Conroy's face. It pulled him down, and then they both died. Husker John was the third one up. He was met by a larger warrior. He ran towards it, then stopped to throw his spear. The Yautja avoided it, but left itself open. Husker John used this moment to get behind the Yautja. He held onto its face and used a knife to cut the Yautja's neck. The lifeless body fell to the ground. The fight was quick, but he won. Pope was up last. He assured Husker John, "I'm not going to die." He approached the arena while holding a hatchet. Everyone watched him, as this was the final battle. He looked over to his opponent and he saw the same clawed hand attachments that the others used, which meant the battle would be up close. Pope would get injured over his left shoulder when the Yautja fired one wrist blade during an attack. He fell to his knee from the pain. His opponent approached him. Pope swiped right to left, then down and up. The Yautja dodged it and lunged with its right hand, which only had one claw. Pope's hatchet was hooked by this claw and jerked it out of his hand. Pope would then get a flashback memory of a girl he knew in the Hudson Valley. He saw her hand outstretched as he left on a train 3 years ago to fight Indians. Her name was Charlotte. She was the love of his life. And then his mind came back to the real world. The Yautja reached out with its own hand, trying to grab him, but Pope ducked under and grabbed the net gun weapon on the enemy's belt. He fired it to the Yautja's face, carrying it backwards, wrapping and then digging into its face. It fell onto its back. Trying to pull it off with one hand, the Yautja aimed its left hand towards Pope and fired both claws. Pope ducked to dodge it. He moved towards the warrior, pulling the blade from where it was lodged into his shoulder. He would then use that bladed weapon and plunged it into one of the Yautja's eyes, ending its life. Husker John would then help Pope back to their side of the arena and patch his wounds with magnesium. The tall Yautja with the spear would then appear again. Husker John would approach him, and they spoke for a moment. Just outside of range from Pope, he could not hear what they spoke about. As Pope would lead 2 horses carrying the bodies of Conroy and Moats, that's when he remembered what Husker John told him. Husker John said this, "As much as I hate these warriors, I respect them. They've asked me to join them. They say they want to learn from me. I'm an old man, sir. I've done all I can for the Buffalo Soldiers, so I think I'm going to take them up on their offer. Fact is that life is too short to not seek out something you want. I've been wanting a change, and this seems right for me." Those were the last words from Husker John. He stayed behind with the Yautja. When Pope returned back to his other men, he told everyone that Husker John passed away and his body was unrecoverable. They would mourn their loss, accept it, and return to New Mexico. Pope would leave his men there. When his commission was up, he had leave saved. This was a good time for him to find the girl he left in the past and see if she could be part of his future. Whatever decision he made, he was never going to forget his brave soldiers, the magnificence of Husker John, and the strange warriors they fought, who also allowed his men to live. He realized the Yautja were merely testing themselves against a few of the finest cavalrymen in the army, the group known as the Buffalo Soldiers. The end. Part of this story about American soldiers looking for Pancho Villa was based off a real event in history, but the names of the soldiers were made up. It's one of those endings that really goes beyond the predictable endings we normally see in these stories. The title of the story is also how Pope makes his way home. May blood pave my way home is another way of saying he had to spill the blood of his enemies to survive and go home. And this is what I want to see in films, something completely different, unexpected, and showing a clan of predators, rather than one predator dying at the end. The novels and comic books have some really good stories that could be adapted or even give inspiration to future films. I hope someday we can get some great stories like this one, but on film. A new class has been released for Predator Hunting Grounds. It is called the Exiled Predator, and it has a small backstory. It says here, it's unknown when or how this predator was exiled, but it was clearly able to adapt and hunt undetected in the far reaches of Yautja territory. While avoiding common hunting grounds, this Yautja was able to hunt legendary warriors on chains of the Pacific Islands. The exiled predator carefully interpreted and crafted armor from local raw materials out of a deep respect for these warriors. Upon closer inspection, the body armor does not look like the normal metal used by other hunters. It looks more primal. You could say it might be made of wood, and it could be linked to the comic book story called Predator Hunters from 2017. The story opens up with 3 stranded survivors on a remote island. They are desperately running through the jungle, trying to escape some unknown force, something they have never seen before. One of them gets caught and eliminated. The others fear for their lives and try to run off. As they reach the end of a cliff, a vicious, tribal-looking predator appears before them. It drops its mask and roars at them. One survivor tries to fight back, but is defeated very quickly. The last survivor fights the predator, but ends up hanging over the edge of the cliff. He holds onto the dreadlocks, and it's torn off as he falls down below. For now, he made it out alive, and so the hunter walks off with his trophy. The story then shifts to Enoch Nakai, who is now working at a gas station far away. You might remember him from an older story called Predator Big Game, where Enoch defeated a predator in combat. He is then approached by 3 individuals, Jaya Soames, Tyler Swain, and Rafael Herrera. Jaya is aware of the incident that occurred at Cole Army Base, where Enoch was stationed at in the past, and what the true cause of the incident was. Enoch recalls when he defeated the predator, and was later asked to join a Black Ops team to hunt them down, but he declined the offer because they were mostly interested in the technology. Enoch just wanted to kill them. Jaya wants Enoch to join their cause. He's a warrior at heart, and he would be a fine addition to the team because of what he has seen and what he knows. At first, Enoch wants nothing to do with their cause, but before Jaya Soames is about to leave with her group, Enoch changes his mind and joins them. Along the way, they all speak about their encounters with a predator. Herrera was deep in the jungle when this happened. The devil himself walked the earth, but I discovered that the devil can die. But it was a hollow victory. The battle mortally wounded my organization, and within a few weeks, a rival finished the job and my family. Tyler Swain had a mission in Afghanistan. While he was transporting supplies, his team was attacked. Things looked pretty bad for them, as they were about to get overrun, but just then, a mortar blast injured Swain and he passed out. He blacked out for some time, but when he woke up, it was real quiet. And then, that's when I saw it. Everyone was dead, and that bastard was taking his trophies. I was too hurt to do a goddamn thing. As for Jaya Soames, her great-grandfather, Captain Edward Soames, was tracking down Spring-Heeled Jack, who terrorized the late 19th century London. But Jack was no man, it was a predator. One can only imagine how he brought down the creature with the weapons of the day. The story of Edward Soames was in the comic book Predator Nemesis. He lured the predator into a mud pool, cut off its arm, and its own weight dragged it down to the bottom. After this encounter with the predator, Captain Soames would return to India. While he was there, he would be under the employ of the Maharajas to hunt man-killing tigers, or so the story goes. This family tradition was passed down to her grandfather and then to her father, until finally it was then passed down to Jaya Soames. The team would return to a vessel and meet the last member of their team, Mandy Graves. She survived an encounter with a bad blood predator. Jaya would brief the team on their mission. A fishing vessel out of Fiji was blown off course by a severe storm. The vessel had damaged hydraulics, and after being hit by a rogue wave, it capsized and sank. A few members did survive. They drifted on a raft to an isolated island, but it was not uninhabited. These men had gone through hell to reach the island, but now they were about to meet the devil. The 3 men were captured and caged up. They observed their captor for some time. This continued for several days, until one morning the men awoke to find their captor gone, their cages open, and weapons left for them. If only they had known what they were in for. 2 men did not survive this encounter, but one of them did. He fell from a high cliff area into the ocean, but later returned to the raft and took his chances in the open water. The man drifted into the open ocean for days, until he was picked up by a New Zealand trawler. Before he died, he told his story to the vessel's captain. There were other islands nearby. As to why the survivor took his chances in the ocean, perhaps he was fishing illegally, so it was best to drift in the ocean than to stay on the island. Back in the 1800s, the islands were settled by Malcolm Bunting. He wanted to create a tropical utopia, so he exchanged valuable lands to gain ownership of the island chain. The current steward is Bunting's great-grandson, Dr. Henry Bunting. But the one reason Jaya wants to go there is because a predator could be on the neighboring island. Before the fisherman passed away, he shared his story, but to back up his claims, he brought with him a piece of the predator dreadlocks. He never let it go. Enoch does not sound too confident in facing more predators. Since he fought one before, he knows what their technology can do. Jaya Soames would then show him their weapon arsenal, but Enoch thinks it's not enough. In another storage room, she reveals some items they took from other predators. They analyzed some of their tech and developed countermeasures. We get a small look at Jaya Soames during her encounter with a predator. She knew what these creatures could do, and what they would continue to do unless they were stopped. So, like everyone else who's part of this team, she too faced a predator at some time. As they approach Amelia Island, they have to dock with no visible weapons. The ship they're on is disguised as a science vessel, so they don't arouse any suspicions. The last scene here is a look at one predator catching an animal, eating its meat, and giving a small portion to a captured human. During the cover of darkness, the team sends in drones to the neighboring island of Kahua. They switch to night vision and find the waterfall mentioned in the briefing, but keep looking for anything unusual. Just a bit further away, they locate a site with a few human skulls. This is enough intel for the team to move in. As they pull the drones back, they get spotted by one of the predators on the island. It seems as if the predators will be expecting company very soon. When the team meets up with Dr. Bunting for a meal, Jaya Soames explains their reason for visiting the area, which is their cover story. They're conducting inventories of fish stocks and conditions of some of the more isolated reefs in this part of the Pacific. Malcolm Bunting found this island long ago, which was far from man's reach as can be. He traded most of his holdings to secure it and create a refuge from mankind's excesses. This was then passed down from generation to generation. Even though the island is mostly self-sustained for their way of life, Mr. Bunting still has family holdings in New Zealand and elsewhere, which provide him with extra income to support the community. When asked about Kahua Island, which is not far away, Mr. Bunting says his grandfather turned it into his own private hunting preserve. He brought in all sorts of exotic animals. He also says he's never set foot on Kahua Island. As the team starts to pack up and head back to the vessel, one lady from the island says goodbye to them, but tells Jaya Soames something strange. She says this: "Please, come back and take me away from here. Come back soon," which gives the impression that this Paradise Island has more secrets than we know. The team reviews the drone footage, so they decide to suit up and head to Kahua Island at night. When they arrive at the beach, they activate their cooling units and night vision. As they reach the jungle area, they hear rustling nearby. They draw their weapons and prepare, but out jumps a tiger and it runs off. It's not what they are looking for. While the team was distracted by this, one member gets attacked. A spear impales his body from behind. It seems like something has spotted them. They assume they can't be seen by predators because their thermal signature is concealed by their suits, but they can see the predators with their modified visors. They open fire, injure the predator, and follow the blood trail. Mandy takes lead and rushes to find the location of the target, but then loses the trail. It disappeared. But just then, the predator leaps down from above her, slashing her with its weapon. She's down, and the predator makes a run for it. The team fires their weapons. The predator tries to run, but suffers many wounds. It stops and gets taken down. When they examine the body, they notice something is different. This predator has no technology. It's primitive. Then they hear someone nearby, a prisoner. They set him free and tell him, "You are safe. It is dead." But the man tells them, "What do you mean, it? There are 3 more of them." When the strike team contacts base command on the boat, Durga orders them to check the creature and camp. Take whatever equipment you can and head for the boats. There's no valuable gear but wooden masks and spears. But out of nowhere, one of the members gets attacked. The team splits up. The main group heads back to the boat, and 2 of them would cover the rear, while Herrera and another hold down a line of defensive fire. He thinks their cold suits will make them blind to the predators, but he is unaware that these hunters are not using the PredTech with thermal vision modes, so they are still visible to them. Swain is then ordered to provide cover fire for Herrera, who is still behind them. Swain tries to stay, but sees another team member get taken down and his skull ripped out in front of his eyes. He is unable to open fire and just runs away. Mandy then shows up and meets up with Swain, who says, "We gotta get out of here. They're right behind me." Mandy is unfazed by his warning and runs back towards the enemy. She would then come across one predator, but she chooses to throw her weapon down and pulls out her knife, issuing a challenge of honorable combat. Then, out of nowhere, a grenade is tossed ahead of Mandy. It explodes, and she falls to the ground. As she gets up, Enoch greets her. The 2 of them catch up with the others on the beach, just in time to grab a boat and escape to the vessel. Enoch asks them, "Did you see Herrera? What happened to Herrera?" But both Swain and Mandy stay quiet. It looks like Herrera was just captured by the predators, hung upside down and tied up. One of the hunters pulls out a weapon and cuts Herrera's ear off, only to add it to his collection of ear trophies. Back on the vessel, Mandy gets mad at Swain for not helping Herrera and leaving him behind. Swain would be approached by Jaya Soames. She tells him, "You cannot withhold information. We are at a crisis point. What happened out there?" Swain didn't see Herrera, but he saw one of the predators kill Bradford and tear him apart. Then it looked at me. I froze. It was like Afghanistan all over again. The truth is, his heroic predator encounter, it was a lie. He was never injured. He was hiding. He was the only one left. He had a chance to shoot the creature, but he was too scared to do anything. The team counted on him. Herrera counted on him, but he let everyone down. Enoch would then reach out to Mandy about what happened. Mandy thinks back to when her team was taken by the bad blood predator, saying she was supposed to die with her team. She wants to be with them. Enoch recalls the time he lost a lot of friends to these creatures. Maybe there's a reason he was spared. Enoch wants to hunt them down on the island, and Mandy just might join him. The man they rescued from the island then starts to panic again, saying, "We need to leave right now. It's not safe here." Jaya Soames then tells him that the people on Amelia Island are in danger from those creatures. This man seems to be the only one aboard the vessel that knows what's really going on. He tells her, "Don't you understand? This is their show." We then see a few boats with passengers covered in what looks like predator masks, rowing near the boat. The battle is not over. Henry Bunting is aboard these small boats, and he calls out to the crew aboard the Durga vessel, telling them to prepare to be boarded without retaliation, as he placed explosives on the hull of the ship. He detonates one of the bombs to prove he's not joking around. Once Dr. Bunting boards the Durga vessel, the entire crew is secured, and only specific people are taken back to the island. He says there's a special ceremony, one that's become tradition for uninvited visitors. This is when he explains the story about his great-grandfather, who founded this colony and broke his back to build it. The colony was knackered, coming apart at the seams, but one night, fire came down from the sky, a fire that changed everything. That's when the exiles arrived. These were monsters, devils from hell, but great-grandfather reckoned these were visitors from another world. Their ship had sank in the open ocean and sunk like a stone. Its crew barely escaped alive to our little paradise. But they were soon at their business. Great-granddad rallied the colony and fought the exiles. Many colonists died for each exile they brought down. After a long war, his colony had changed. They grew strong and with a purpose. They became more primal. They no longer live within nature. Nature lived within them. After several exiles were killed, Great-granddad decided to capture the rest. The remaining 4 exiles were starved to make them weak enough for transport to Kahua Island. He planned to make a game preserve there, bringing in exotic animals from far-off lands. But now he had the most exotic catch of all. The exiles were then released into the jungles of Kahua Island with no means of escape. Over time, more game was brought in, like boars and the odd tiger. The exiles had the means to survive, if they had the backbone, that is. And that they did. Before long, they were thriving, like they were born to hunt, to survive, to kill. Kahua Island became a place to hunt other men and women. The people of Amelia Island embraced the predators and their reason for hunting. The 4 people brought back to the island were Swain, Mandy, Enoch, and Jaya. They were given weapons to take and a few minutes head start. The hunt would soon begin for them. As the 4 of them run through the jungle, they decide to split up. Their chances of survival might be better if one of them makes it out alive. Mandy gets attacked first by one of the human hunters dressed up like a predator, but she defends herself by using the spear weapon he threw at her. A few men looking for Enoch would pass a stream of water, only for a coconut to fall inside. They get surprised, and one man says this, "Nearly crapped me undies," which I think is the funniest part of the story. So anyways, Enoch would then be seen up top in a tree, hiding and waiting for the right moment to strike the targets that are below him. He jumps down and slaughters the few men nearby. A few hunters would locate Jaya Soames in the jungle. They surround her, and she gets injured. She falls down, barely able to fight back. It seems like this might be the end for her. But just then, one of the predators leaps down and takes all the men down, sparing Jaya Soames and letting her live. Maybe it's because she was not holding any weapons, so it would not be a fair fight. So she runs off. Jaya Soames would later run into Artemis, the lady she met on the island earlier. Artemis wants to stop what's happening, so they run to her boat and head for the Durga vessel. Artemis would distract the guards upon arriving. Meanwhile, Jaya Soames would go underwater and remove the mine from the hull of the ship. The two of them would take down some of the guards and secure the ship. The situation is then under control, but they cannot leave yet. She plans to leave a parting gift to her host. The chopper flies into the nearby beach and makes contact with Dr. Bunting and a few of his men. They fire their weapons upon them, and many casualties occur. Dr. Bunting is last seen at the mercy of Mandy. She tells him one last message: be the hunter. Enoch is then shown at the edge of a waterfall as two predators have tracked him down, but Swain shows up and rams his spear into one of them. This time, he had the courage to attack a predator. The one predator close to them gets blasted by the weapons on the chopper. Swain and Enoch get airlifted away. All four of them made it out alive. The last predator shows up and Mandy is about to fire upon it, but Jaya tells her to hold her fire. This one spared her life. He deserves a little dignity at long last. She throws a bag towards him as they take off. Within the bag are items of predator technology, a gift left for the last surviving predator. All those years on the island with no way to leave, but now things are different. He pays respects to his fallen warrior brothers, those that fought alongside him during their time on the island. He activates his wrist computer and pushes a few buttons. He might be contacting others to help him, or the constant beeping could be the self-destruct device. But this is where the story ends. Before this predator class was revealed, some game files were data mined that showed tribal skin textures and a tiki predator class. If we look at the meaning of tiki, there are some definitions that mention wood or stone, along with a connection to Polynesian culture. The name tiki could have just been used as a placeholder until the final name was revealed later on. The story of Predator Hunters talks about exiled predators and how their armor was made of wood, since they lost access to their technology when their ship sank in the ocean. It's possible that the exiled predator is the one who survived at the end of the story, but since it does have different armor, I think the comic book just served as an inspiration for this new class. So that covers the lore around the exiled predator in Predator Hunting Grounds, and how it is linked to the ones from the comic book Predator Hunters. The predator creature we know today did go through various changes throughout production. Even during filming, the team was still unsure of the design they had available. One of the early ideas they wanted was for the creature to have leg extensions and a third leg joint, but this design choice was not going to work. Now, they needed a creature that could climb and fight and walk through water and everything else you see in the film. The original suit just didn't fit the action requirements. That's why they went with a person in a humanoid costume later on. They had to work with the original Predator design, which was more like a giant insect. They used a similar build but in a red suit for other scenes, like the camouflage effects. Jean-Claude Van Damme was wearing the red suit at some time until he got replaced. The director, John McTiernan, contacted the studio executives and told them, "This really is not the suit we want for the movie," and so Arnold then suggested they should contact Stan Winston. They worked together on Terminator, so maybe Stan could help them out. When Stan Winston was on a plane going to Japan, James Cameron was also aboard. It was then that James told Stan, "I always wanted to see something with mandibles," and this was the starting point of a new creature. The addition of the dreadlocks on the head came from a piece of artwork in Joel Silver's office. a painting of a Rastafarian warrior. When you combined the two ideas together, it became the iconic creature we know as Predator. Kevin Peter Hall would then be casted as the Predator, since his height was 7 feet 2 inches. This gave the Predator a more threatening appearance as he towered over the other actors. So that was a quick rundown about the original Predator design. But this brings us to recent news from William Stout on his website. He is an American artist that specializes in fantasy and science fiction. His work is around storyboard art to production design. On September 20th of 2021, he posted a piece about this time designing the Predator, which looks very different from all the other things we saw before. He had his first meeting with John McTiernan and production designer John Vallone. At the time, the movie's script went under its original title of Hunter. During their meeting, McTiernan opened up a bookmarked page in a book on alien designer H.R. Giger and said this: "I would not be unhappy if the creature looked like this," while pointing to a specific Giger painting. William was stunned and wondered why they couldn't just hire Giger for this project, but he took that design and created his own version of it. To satisfy McTiernan, he did a creature with Giger-esque designs. The tail was also able to extend or flip forward and attach to the head. You can see how similar they look, but William was trying to move away from Giger's art style and have something more unique. He presented a few ideas of how the creature might look. This one had a triple eyelid design instead of the normal top and bottom eyelid. Another version went back to a more organic form. Various types of teeth were drawn up. The head also changed in different drawings. He even tried to show them his idea of its own camouflage abilities by sprouting additional pods that looked like vines. The creature could camouflage with plants or trees in the jungle. William would later show John McTiernan another drawing he came up with, going back to a more Giger-esque style of biomechanical plating on the body. This was one design John did like. He made another drawing, changing the hunter's design to closely resemble a catfish skeleton. But in the end, all of these ideas were replaced by Stan Winston's work, which is how he got the Predator we see today. So what do you think of William's drawings? Do you think they could use them for anything related to Predator in the future? Put your thoughts in the comment section. What's up everyone, Carlos here. There's been an update to Predator Hunting Grounds on August 31st of 2021. And with it are some new lore pieces connected to Isabel. She was seen in the Predators movie in 2010. She was briefly mentioned in some collectible tapes from the update back in July. But this new update has 4 extra tapes that go into her story. She speaks to Agent Keyes about her time away from Earth. It also includes a small bit of information about what happened to Royce after the comic book sequel. This is some new lore that we can dive into, so here we go. When she returned back to Earth via an alien spacecraft, she's picked up by an organization that Keyes is working for. She landed within Mexican airspace and was picked up along with the spaceship she was in. She explains her story while being held unlawfully. Keyes looks over her impressive service record and wonders why she suddenly went AWOL. Isabel says she was taken, but specifically abducted. Agent Keyes believes she's made contact with an aggressive alien civilization, one whose culture is deeply saturated in the ritual hunting of other intelligent species. Isabel knows about the incident that occurred in Val Verde when Dutch's team was attacked by a hunter. Agent Keyes says, "We already have the ship. We just want your story. After that, you can go home." But she's not sure if she can trust them. His response is that they are trying to stop these hunters, and by the look of the inventory in that ship she was in, she was also. Within the spacecraft they found alien jawbones, thermal netting, Predator armor, and a bolt-action sniper rifle. Ballistics say that it's been fired a lot. As a way to make things a bit more fair, Keyes would give a little intel about his role in the situation. He's part of a task force directed by the United States government to assess and respond to a very real alien threat, one that attacked first and continues to do so with impunity. Isabel would ask how many have been on Earth, but Keyes is unable to share that type of classified information. Isabel assumes they just don't know exactly how many. But Keyes is aware that Isabel has killed one of these alien creatures, and he wants to know more, especially since she commandeered an alien spacecraft and successfully piloted it back to Earth. He's one of the few people on the planet that will believe her. He promises to do everything he can to take what she tells him and use it against these monsters. And so, she begins sharing her story. Moments before her abduction, she was on a mission. After this, she went into hiding, but refuses to elaborate on other details. However, she is able to describe being abducted. She had fallen asleep during the mission, and when she woke up, she was falling like in a nightmare. It was a parachute insertion, like a halo jump. By the time she realized what was happening, the chute opened on its own. From that elevation, she was not able to recognize anything. To her, it was only a jungle. During the time of her abduction, she believes she was not on Earth. Upon landing within this jungle, she did a supply check on herself and began to recon the area. She assumed that she could be on Earth, maybe somewhere she's never been to. It soon became obvious that this was not Earth. The combination of flora was wrong. Too many species together that shouldn't have been, and others I could not identify at all. Not long after landing, she spotted an American mercenary, a Mexican cartel enforcer, and a Spetsnaz Special Forces soldier debriefing each other. She thinks they were all deployed to the planet at the same time. Over the course of a couple of hours, they found 2 American criminals, a Yakuza enforcer, and a member of a Sierra Leone RUF death squad. It didn't take long to see what they all had in common: killing. Because of the situation they were all in, they agreed to work together to find a way out of the jungle. There were no signs of civilization. This was not Earth. Over a short time, it became clear that they were being pursued, hunted by something. Some type of hunting animal was used to flush them out. After this encounter, they concluded that the planet they were on was a kind of preserve. They were brought there as prey. Out of the entire group, there were only 2 survivors, herself and the American mercenary Royce. During the comic book adaptation of the 2010 Predators movie, Isabel goes into more detail about the Guatemala incident in 1987. An American Spec Ops team went into the jungle. She read the debriefing report about it, which was classified. This creature hunted them. It was invisible in our spectrum. It was relentless. A killer. A true predator. She tells them about the time she went to Guatemala with her spotter, Archuleta. She was part of a mission to take down some nasty rebels. The report she read about the 1987 incident was hard to believe. She thought going to the jungle might give her some answers. She wanted to expand on her mission by searching for clues of what really happened there. The debriefing said the creature was beaten, but it killed itself with a powerful explosive. The bomb site proved the report had at least some basis in fact. She never mentioned to her partner Archuleta how she felt she was being watched, how the jungle kept talking to her. Archuleta thought she was just crazy, but things got worse when her partner got captured. It was all her fault. She never should have sent him off the mission to look for invisible things. While she was looking for aliens, she forgot about the other horrors around her. With about 20 enemy soldiers around Archuleta, she could have taken down a few of them, but she might not make it out alive. All she could do is watch, as her partner was killed by the soldiers who captured him. His death was on her. She carried that burden all this time. She says to Agent Keyes, "Killing does not keep you alive. We infiltrate, complete the mission, and get out. We were trained to survive, not to butcher civilians." Earning the trust of Royce was difficult at first. He worked with them because he saw it was tactically advantageous. He saw the other members as disposable. When they were trying to identify the enemy, he used the other members as bait to lure out the enemy. Someone died. Even if nobody on that list was that trustworthy, Isabel knew Royce was the best chance she had at getting out alive. And she was right. They were the only two that survived this encounter, but they got injured. While they were hiding to recuperate, they grew close. She was hoping to return to Earth with Royce if they had not marked him. The hunters saw Royce as some kind of champion. He killed a hunter, survived for so long. They must have thought he was worthy, so they gave him Predator armor. This is referring to the comic book sequel to Predators. The story continues with Royce and Isabel still trapped on the game preserve. They survive for a long time, but one night, a predator finds their campsite to drop off a package, then leaves. Royce is given predator armor to fight against a giant, four-armed predator. Isabel says that there were times Royce had spoken about how he secretly enjoyed hunting men, that it was dishonest to think otherwise. This is somewhat linked to the prequel comic book story of Royce's mission in Africa. His backstory shows that he was hired to take out specific targets for the right price. He's not there to rescue people, he's just there to eliminate a target and get paid. When the predators gave him that armor, it was like the gods telling him he was right all along. That's when I lost him. Royce would then use the armor's cloak to find a landing site. He took Isabel to it, and there was some kind of dropship and a smaller skiff. She thought they would both take the skiff, but Royce said he wanted to meet them, face to face. I argued with him, pleaded, but there was no point. Whatever connection he had to humanity, to me, died in the jungle. His ship disappeared into the clouds, and I was alone. The last thing Agent Keyes wants to know is how Isabel was able to pilot an alien spacecraft back to Earth. She says that before Royce left, he was able to unlock and ready both ships using the computer on his armor. I don't know if he could have done more, or if he just didn't care to, but it responded to me as though I were one of the hunters. Everything was in their language. Because she was trained in naval navigation, some things made sense out of practicality, and others I figured out through trial and error. Time was difficult to judge there, but I slept several times as I worked it out. There were so many controls with images and holograms. She even assumes the hunters are not that smart. They saw so many of them, but there were no engineers or techs. No one ever performed maintenance. If something broke, they would just abandon it. She thinks it all works for them, but they don't know how it works. Agent Keyes says that's been a running theory about these hunters. Isabel was going through a planetary directory for hours until she found Earth. She grabbed her supplies and started pushing buttons in the directory until the ship rumbled, and then she sat down and prayed. She fell asleep soundly for the first time in a long time. When she woke up, there was Earth, huge and blue. The ship wanted a landing zone, but I could not read the locations, so I chose at random. Before they finished the conversation, the OWLF thanks Isabel for her assistance, and he gives her his card in case she wants to help out again. She says she'll think about it, and says, "Goodbye, Agent Keyes." And that's the closure to the story of Isabel. I like how the lore was connected to the comic book sequel. Even if Royce is out there looking to meet predators, we don't know what happened during this journey of his. Maybe we'll find out, or maybe this will remain a mystery. The end. If you want to see the video about Royce getting Predator armor, I covered that comic book story, which is a sequel to the Predator movie from 2010. And if you want to see Royce's early story from when he went to Africa, I'm going to leave links to those two videos, so check them out if you want to know more. In the year 2018, a set of new stories were released within the novel of Predator, If It Bleeds. Man has once again come up against the ultimate hunter. These stories take place in different time periods and across different cultures. The story I'm going to cover for this video is Three Sparks. It takes place in feudal Japan and follows the story of a disgraced former samurai that goes by the name of Nasu Hiroto. When a mysterious demon sets foot upon their land, it slaughters everyone it meets. Nasu Hiroto is given a chance at redemption if he can stop the demon. The story opens up with Hiroto coming across a few dangling bodies around noon. He could not recognize their social status since they were skinned, so he was unsure if they were a samurai. The bodies had a strong stench, were bloated, and from the heat, he assumes the bodies were there for about 3 days. During his time, he had skinned a lot of game, but even in the state of the bodies, Hiroto was impressed with this Oni butchering these men. He didn't see any signs of rope nearby, so it would take an incredible amount of strength to haul these corpses way up there. In the past, he had seen big cats carry their prey up the trees, but this time, this felt different. It felt staged for their benefit. It was hard to tell if this was a message or to mark their territory. Most men would be full of fear when they see these bodies, but Hiroto tried to hide his admiration for this Oni, and so he acted as if he too was scared. Whatever happened here, it was from a skilled warrior or a demon. Captain Nasu Hiroto's past included him being a hero of the Battle of Daino-ura, hero of the Battle of Kori-kara. He was a master swordsman and champion archer of the Minamoto clan. He could be considered the finest archer in history, if not second only to his father. Yet after the war, there was no peace for Hiroto. He took one of the shogun's ships and traveled wherever the waves carried him, always searching for a new battle, new prey to hunt, new beasts to slay. Over the years, there were many tales of Hiroto. Some say he would hunt tigers in the jungles on Tenjiku, or great white bears in the desolate lands in the north. Some believed that Hiroto was the greatest hunter in the world. When he returned, he was brought before the shogun, Minamoto Yoritomo. After their victory over the Taira clan, the shogun would have given Hiroto great responsibilities, but this meant Hiroto would teach children how to use bows. He said he would grow bored with this task, and felt his skills would be wasted. This was the reason Hiroto left his duties. And so, upon his return to Kamakura, he awaits his final judgment from the shogun. The only reason he came back is because he heard that his lord required his services. People speak about the Oni of Aokigahara Forest, a demon that slaughters men and hangs their bodies. Many samurai have rushed to the forest, trying to win the favor of the shogun, but all have failed. From the few witnesses that survived, they speak of an invisible demon, stronger than any man, and it kills with a spear, claw, or bolts of lightning, before it vanishes as quickly as it appears. Hiroto was very interested in these stories. This is why Hiroto came out of hiding. This Oni would be a great challenge for him. Yoritomo tells Hiroto that the only warning before the Oni strikes its prey are the 3 glowing embers that form a triangle and appear on its victim. After so many have perished fighting this Oni, many believe that it cannot be defeated by a mortal hand. The same thing was said about the great sea beast before Hiroto's father killed it with a single arrow through the eye. The shogun says that this was the greatest feat any man has accomplished under his rule. No man has ever equaled his father's legacy, not even the man who has hunted every dangerous beast under the sun. If Hiroto is able to defeat the Oni of Aokigahara, he could finally match his father's legend. Hiroto could never resist a great challenge. He had never fought a demon before. Hiroto would then begin his new task. Each morning meant he was a bit closer to the mountain, and so was his next great challenge. The shogun would send a young warrior, born of high status. He was Ashikage Motokani, and 5 bodyguards to accompany Hiroto on his journey. Even though Hiroto helped their lord rise to power a long time ago, because he abandoned his duties and fled his homeland, the shogun's other samurai saw him as a dishonorable outcast, a wild man, an anomaly in their orderly world. If things got really bad, Hiroto plans to use them as bait. The map provided by the shogun showed a small village at the edge of the forest, so Hiroto picked that place as their destination. But upon arriving, it was just a bunch of rotten huts and stinking pig pens. It was a good time for them to restock their supplies and ask around for any information, but as they were spotted by the villagers, the local people fled their fields and ran to their huts. Villages like this were often menaced by one conquering army or another. Even during times of peace, bandits were always around. One farmer remained at the center of the village to greet them. He was their appointed headman. Hiroto told his team to stay back, as he would approach the man alone, but Ashikage Motokane did not listen. He walked toward the farmer in a very intimidating way. Hiroto wanted to ask the villagers some questions that might help them, but Ashikage Motokane looked upon them with disgust and saying they should take any supplies they need and move on. Because of how he spoke to the villagers, it was no wonder they saw no difference between bandit and samurai. The headman approached them and said their village already paid their taxes, but the heat had affected their crops, and he asked for them to please have mercy. Hiroto interrupted him and said, "I am Nasu Hiroto. We have come to kill the Oni of Aokigahara." The headman responds with this, "You are not the first. The stories are true. Our land is cursed. It is a terrible scourge. We are so thankful more brave samurai have come to fight the demon." Hiroto noticed the headman did not sound relieved. He was more annoyed by this visit. "Many of you have come through here this summer, eating our food, putting our men to work as guides." One of the villagers saw it first, perched up on the tree, shaped like a man but bigger, with a head like an ox. She thought it was an angry ghost and ran away. Old Genzo saw it too. He heard the thunder when it killed the first samurai. It put the 3 sparks on him too, but Genzo fled before more lightning came. He was lucky it did not chase him, 'cause this Oni is swift as a horse. If any creature could slaughter samurai so easily, the villagers would have no chance against them. Hiroto asked the headman, "How many of your people have died?" The headman says, "It is hard to believe, but none, noble samurai. He has only attacked mighty warriors such as you. Our village has not been troubled by 3 sparks." Ashikaga Motokane accused the villagers of siding with the Oni demon, seeing as how it spared all their lives. The headman pleaded that they would never betray their lord. They even offered gifts to the demon. This only made Ashikage Motokane more irritated. He drew his sword slowly, but Hiroto put him at ease. Hiroto needs information from these people. The forest was unnaturally quiet. The wind did not penetrate the trees. There were no birds singing, no insects buzzing, nothing. No wonder the place was considered haunted, even before the Oni had moved in. When morning came, the others were fully equipped and ready for war. Their bows were strung, spears held high, and their swords at their sides. The shogun's finest looked like fearsome combatants, a worthy challenge for any demon. Meanwhile, Hiroto walked a little behind them. He stripped himself of armor and weapons. He placed a bamboo pole on his shoulder with a bundle hanging from each end. He also rolled onto the field to look and smell like a local farmer. The other samurai thought he had gone mad when they saw Hiroto left his sword behind. But Hiroto knew something the others did not. He would be no threat, especially to a mighty Oni. He took the part of a porter, a local man who would carry the supplies of the other samurai, because the forest was too rugged for their horses. The headman told them the same thing happened with the other samurais that visited. Only the porter carrying their supplies would come back terrified, sometimes covered in blood, but alive. Most beasts on the land would target the weakest prey, but this Oni was different. It attacked the strong. Hiroto would use that information to his knowledge. The other samurai would boast about who would slay the Oni and how they would spend their reward. Meanwhile, Hiroto would keep his head down. He knew it was hard using his eyes to find a creature which was invisible, so he just listened in a forest without sound. Even the faintest thing became audible. The Oni was quiet, but not as quiet as other creatures that hunt. Occasionally, Hiroto would hear flesh scrape against bark, or the creak of a branch as weight settled on it. But there was another sound, barely audible, but unnatural, like the chittering of an insect combined with the slithering of a snake on the sand. This sound was different. All these sounds would have been lost in a noisy forest. He realized right there they were being followed. Hiroto was excited, but tried not to let it show. They later located its samurai body by a nearby stream and missing its head. It's identified as Hojo Murashiga. The identity of this body seems to shake the others, because Hojo Murashiga was a fearsome swordsman, the best of us. Not only did it take his head, this Oni also ripped out his spine. Motokane was stressed the entire day. He got up and spoke out. "Show yourself, demon! Show yourself so I can kill you like the wretched cowardly dog you are." Hiroto took a few steps away from the angry samurai. The local people told him that the Oni threw lightning bolts, and he thought it was not wise to stand close to the most tempting target. While Motokane continued to rant and yell, Hiroto looked for tracks or any clues. He saw footprints on some nearby moss. He examined a cut on a tree. Judging by the height and angle, it had come from someone extremely tall. Deep cuts, incredible strength, with twin blades, an odd weapon. Nearby, he would see green-looking paint, but it was actually the blood of the Oni. The smell was completely alien. He noticed something else by the rocks. He picked it up, but just then, Kaneto's chest exploded, hit by something with a flash of light. Motokane's shouting was interrupted as his bodyguard's blood sprayed him in the face. Kaneto dropped to his knees. His body was lifeless, then flopped forward. His wound must have been incredibly hot. It was burnt, and steam came from the giant hole in Kaneto's back. The samurais reacted instantly. Spears were lifted, and arrows were nocked. They looked around, but could not find a target. The men looked around, but saw nothing. Then they heard a thumping sound as the Oni jumped around from tree to tree, and then silence. It had moved back in the distance to watch them from safety. This meant it would be some time before the next attack. Meanwhile, Hiroto opened his hand to see the item he found by the rock earlier. It was a severed finger of the Oni. It seems that one samurai had challenged it to a duel, and the Oni was injured during that battle. Hiroto spoke to one of the bodyguards named Nobuo. He mentions that he saw the 3 sparks on Kaneto before he died. They lingered for a few heartbeats before the lightning flash appeared. At first, he thought the 3 sparks held some spiritual significance, but now he learns that the Oni uses it to aim before firing the lightning bolt. This knowledge will be useful if he should see the 3 sparks again. During sundown, The next attack occurred upon their team. Hiroto saw a single leaf fall to their side around 50 paces. Then moments later, a branch vibrated, high above around 30 paces ahead. "The Oni is here," he whispered. Nobuo quietly repeated that to the next samurai in line, who then gave the message to Motokane. And this is when Motokane ruined their approach by shouting, "Halt!" Spears and arrows were ready. Hiroto acted like a scared porter and hid behind a tree. After several seconds had passed, 3 flickering sparks appeared on Zenzuko's helmet. "Look out!" Nobuo shouted. He then hurls himself against his companion. The lightning bolt missed its target, and Hiroto had seen exactly from where that bolt had come from. He drops the bamboo shaft and satchels, which was holding his real cargo all along. One samurai launches an arrow into the branches. He missed the Oni, but he was close. The Oni shot another lightning bolt, but this time there were no 3 red sparks seen, so it must have rushed this attack. The blast still hit the samurai, sending one of his legs flying away. Hiroto pulls out one of his special arrows, careful to not cut himself with it. These arrows were covered in a poison. One samurai pulls out his sword, challenging the Oni to a duel, but the Oni learned his mistake last time, so he blew the man's arm off with another lightning bolt. Amongst the chaos, Ashikage Motokane can be seen running away. A tree exploded near him, and he was lost from view in a cloud of splinters. Hiroto was right. The Oni focused on the warriors with weapons, and ignored Hiroto when he was acting like a mere peasant with no weapons. Hiroto is a fast learner. Like him, the Oni only enjoyed hunting dangerous prey. That was its mistake, as Hiroto was more dangerous than any other man. Hiroto focused on where the lightning came from, aimed his arrow, and fired. The Oni's roar was the sign he was struck by the arrow, but Hiroto did not stop. He recalls the time he shot a giant bear with 6 arrows, and it still had the strength to charge him. Surely a demon would be tougher. He continued firing more arrows up into the trees, until finally he saw something move. Light seemed to twist and reflect as it moved around. It was like staring into a diamond, and for the first time he saw the Oni was truly shaped like a man, but larger. Hiroto fired another arrow, and it pierced the Oni's chest. Then it dropped from the tree. He couldn't see if it landed on its feet or its back. Meanwhile, Zenzuko was screaming in pain. Because of Nobuo's quick reactions, his sode had been hit instead of his helmet. His shoulder plate showed a burning hole, and part of it had caught on fire. Nobuo helped his friend before he was burnt alive in his own armor. Hiroto was only able to hide so many arrows inside the bamboo pole, so he picked up Zenzuka's quiver as he ran past them. He said to the other men, "It is wounded. Follow when you can." Hiroto ran through the bushes and chased after the Oni. He noticed insects and lizards that could become the same color as the ground around them. This Oni's magic worked far better, but in a similar manner. When he locates the spot where the Oni had fallen, more green blood is found nearby. When it's fresh, it glows like a smashed firefly, easy to see and track as the light was fading quickly. Later on, Nobuo had gotten Zenzuka's armor off. It was burning and had to be removed. But the other samurai's shoulder was severely injured. His right arm hung useless at this point. Injuries like this would make any normal man feel a lot of pain, but he hid it behind a mask of grim determination to stop this Oni, and carried his katana weapon in his left hand. Nobuo finally saw the Oni's blood and says, "Then we can track it." Hiroto tells him that the arrows he used on the Oni were coated in a concentrated poison from jellyfish. They decide to wait to see if the Oni will suffer any weakness, paralysis, or even death from it. Samurai consider poison a cowardly and dishonorable way to kill, but Nobuo and Zanzuka did not disagree with using this method. At this point, they just wanted to survive. Motokane would show up a minute later and joins them in following the trail of green blood. When they first encountered the Oni, it was easily jumping from treetop to treetop. Now, it was sticking to the ground. An experienced hunter would use this blood trail to set up a trap or ambush if it was being followed. Hiroto offers Motokane the chance to take lead, trying to convince him to get the striking blow on the weakened Oni, but he refuses and puts Nobuo in charge of the lead. Further along the path, they would find a spot near a land bridge with a big amount of blood. It took Hiroto a moment to spot the danger up ahead. Among the roots, there was something metallic. It was hidden slightly, but with a keen eye, you could see it was a trap. The blood trails show the demon walking around the pond and behind them. When the trap was activated by the lead man, maybe a snare or spring noose, the sound would attract their attention forward, while the demon would attack them from behind. With only 4 members left alive, the Oni could take out half of them in one move. Hiroto whispered to Nobuo and said this: "Count to 30 and set off the trap. Throw this rock at it." He crept back to Motokane and Zanzuka and waited. If he can spot the creature moving, he's ready to put an arrow through it. Then he waited for Nobuo to make his move. Nobuo threw the rock at the trap. It erupted with yellow light. Nobuo hurled through the air as fire debris fell from the explosion. It was not a normal trap, but something more powerful. Hiroto was so impressed with this Oni's power. He thought to himself, "If I had weapons such as this, there is nothing I could not hunt." Hiroto could barely see, but the 3 red dots appeared on his arm, climbing upward slowly, until it disappeared over his chest. Instinctively, he flung his body to the side, knowing a lightning bolt was sure to follow. The tree behind him was pierced open, and splinters flew outward. He was the one who had hurt the Oni, so now he was its greatest threat. It was rather strange how the Oni was able to pick him out and see in the dark. Hiroto got to his feet and quickly ran, trying to put more trees between his body and the Oni's fury. As he tried to escape, more lightning struck. Branches came crashing down, rocks shattered into pieces, and bushes burst into flame. Hiroto made it to safety by taking cover behind a boulder. He then peeked over the top and saw that some trees were set on fire from the trap set by the Oni. It was still using its magic to conceal its body, but as it neared a fire, Hiroto saw it. It looked like pieces of broken glass in the image of a tall man. Zanzuka saw it too. He lifted his katana in one hand, charged, and let out a war cry. The light twisted where the Oni's head could have been, as if it turned to face the incoming threat. What looked like the Oni's arm raised up, and 2 blades glowed in the night. Hiroto rose to his feet, pulled back his bowstring, and released an arrow towards it. The arrow disappeared into the demon's unnatural form, piercing its flesh. A mere man would perish in seconds from this attack, but not this demon. The reflective broken glass of the Oni's magic showed it was still standing, but everything had a weak spot. It was only a matter of finding it. He pulled back his bow and unleashed another arrow. It traveled through the air. If it had no heart, then he would try to disable its arms. It struck the Oni, but the arm still came down, slicing Zanzuka in half. As the samurai's body went passing by both sides of the Oni, Hiroto truly saw it for the first time. His last arrow had broken the evil spell. It was truly a giant, taller than any samurai he ever saw. The large head was made of shining metal. Its hair was like a sadhu monk, and body covered in a fisherman's net. Hiroto fired off 2 more arrows, one in the stomach and another in the leg. Suddenly, the boulder in front of Hiroto disintegrated. When the flash occurred, he was hurled through the air. It turns out the Oni did not need the 3 sparks to aim its lightning, but it did help the accuracy. Upon hitting the ground so hard, it knocked the wind out of him. He also lost his bow. He was near the edge of the pond, just 20 paces away. He saw Nobuo's body laying in the mud. He was breathing, but knocked unconscious. He saw the Oni approaching. It had given up on stealth, as its heavy footsteps could be heard crashing against the rocks. He could see the Oni coming closer and closer. Hiroto had no weapons, and Nobuo's swords were too far away. The only option he had was to hide, and surprise it later on. Hiroto was an excellent fighter with his bare hands, but his opponents were not usually as big as a horse. He laid in the murk, holding his breath, as the Oni walked past him. Either it could not see him, or it was going to finish off another person first. Hiroto reached out with his hand to feel something wooden, smooth, and with a spike. Maybe he could use it. As he slowly lifted himself from the murk, he saw the Oni was standing over Nobuo. Looking at the Oni, Hiroto could see plenty of arrows embedded across its body, each wound leaking green blood. He could read the Oni's intentions just by his actions. The Oni was furious. Even though Nobuo was not the one who injured it, it lifted its arm blade, about to kill him anyway. As Hiroto tried to rise quietly, he still made some noise. Maybe it was the pond water dripping from the war club, or the mud sucking his skin as he rose up. Either way, the Oni heard him. It spun around, its braids whipping in the movement. It towered over Hiroto, but it did not strike him down right away. The Oni paused, perhaps confused, as if Hiroto were the invisible one now. Hiroto swung the Tetsubo weapon he picked up, aiming for the head, but its sudden movement caused him to strike it in the shoulder instead. Flesh and blood were torn from the body. He continued his attack with an overhand strike. Then, with an arc movement, he swung the Oni's extended leg. He heard a snapping sound, and it dropped to its knees. The Oni retaliated by lashing out with its twin blades, but Hiroto blocked it with his Tetsubo weapon. But the blades cut through the wood as if it were nothing, cutting Hiroto's face at the same time. It was the worst pain he ever felt in his life. The blow had rattled his brain. The world was spinning. All he could do at this point was hold on. He felt the cuts over his face, felt an empty eye socket, and screamed. Through his remaining eye, he watched the demon trying to get up, but its broken leg kept it kneeling down. Hiroto had seen many enemies fall before him. Something about the way the Oni was moving said that it was done. It began crawling toward Hiroto. He tried to stand, but his body was in so much pain, it would not do what he wanted. All he could do was crawl backwards. Nobuo had just woken up, calling out for the hunter. His sword was still in a sheath, and he threw it to Hiroto. It landed in his lap. The Oni pulled back its fist, then aiming it at Hiroto's heart. But with a quick swing, Hiroto slashed the creature. The katana cut through half the demon's chest. Blood splattered into the forest in a long arc, and then the two of them remained there for a short time. Staring at each other, the demon twitched. The twin blades dropped slowly to the ground. It twisted the blade free, and 3 sparks, the Oni of Aokigahara, was no more. Hiroto was feeling tremendous amounts of pain, but he was still able to laugh anyway. The summer of death was finally over. It was a fine hunt, one that Hiroto will remember for the rest of his life. Ashikage Motokane would then come out of hiding. He was within the trunk of a hollow tree. "You're still alive. Is it done?" he asked, as he slowly got out. Hiroto was feeling weak and nauseous. He walked towards Ashikage and asked, "Were you hiding in there all night?" Ashikage said this, "Yes, and I was all alone, because some bodyguard you are." Hiroto didn't even think twice about looking back. When he heard Nobuo's sword clear its sheath, he cut Ashikage's head clean off. Then its head bounced down the rocks. He says to Hiroto, When we report to the shogun, it was a shame there were no other survivors. If a samurai chooses to hide during battle, it is dishonorable. Then blaming the casualties on another is disgraceful. Ashikage was punished immediately by Nobuo. When Nasu Hiroto returned to the shogun, he presented the magnificent trophy he acquired from the Oni. It was on the floor between them, and they spoke privately. The shogun realized that Hiroto was different from other samurai. The others would spend their whole lives to make a mask that never shows fear, that declares they live for battle, hiding their true weakness beneath. But for Hiroto, there is no mask. You only feel alive when you are hunting something capable of taking your life. Nothing else will do. Hiroto simply nodded, agreeing with what the shogun learned about him. Minamoto Yoritomo says he's had a problem for many years, and they could learn much from the Oni of Aokigahara. It was invisible, calculating, hiding in plain sight, then attacking with ruthless efficiency, leaving his enemies filled with dread. It was the ultimate assassin. To be stalked by such would bring nightmares to even the bravest samurai indeed. The shogun would then offer Hiroto the chance to never be bored again, to have a hunt which never ends. The shogun has many enemies, dangerous men. Sometimes politics make it so that he cannot deal with them directly. The Oni has shown him the answer. The shogun wants invisible killers that use methods most samurai would not agree to do. He requires men that can fight like demons. Hiroto was getting excited. But such a task would require the utmost secrecy. This group of men would be called Shinobi no Mono. They would emulate the Oni of Aokigahara. The shogun asks Nasu Hiroto if he would build this organization for him. He gladly accepts the offer by saying, "It would be an honor. The first ninja bowed to the first shogun." The end. All I can say about this story is, wow, that was truly amazing. A great story with an ending that surprised me. The ninja were created to collect information by the use of stealth and to exterminate any opposing threat to the ruler of Japan. They were the unseen warriors that used different methods than that of a samurai. These were traits picked up by the Oni that they encountered. Invisible, silent, stalking its prey, then eliminating them at the right time by any means necessary. This story led to the creation of the ninja, at least for the lore within the Predator universe. This is one of a few stories that is linked to real historical events or individuals, and use it as the starting point for their own story. Minamoto no Yoritomo was the founder and the first shogun of the Kamakura shogunate of Japan. Aokigahara Forest is a real location in Japan. A few years before this story came out, Sideshow Collectibles made a Predator figure. Its design was reminiscent of a Japanese ogre called Oni. After this, there were other Predator figures based off a samurai design. So that covers the story of Three Sparks from the novel Predator, If It Bleeds. What do you think about the story? Give me your feedback in the comments section. This video took a long time to put together, so please leave a like on it. And if you want to see more stories like this, all you have to do is subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching. This is Carlos or Acid Glow, and I'll see you on the next hunt.